Hey guys, my name is Haley and I feel like I'm very aggressively fall right now. I have also decimated my favorite shelves a little bit because I have discovered that some of my favorites are horror and thriller videos, and I'm going to be filming a horror and thriller recommendations video today, so I feel like that was very festive and in the mood and ready for the season for fall. So we're going to get into my recommendations. I'm going to start off with not scary at all, but just kind of weird and spooky in case you don't like horror. Then get into some more thrillers and then do like straight up horror at the end. So here we go. So for my two recommendations for if you don't really like horror at all but still want to try and be somewhat festive for spooky season, I have a paranormal series, and that is The Name of the Star by Maureen Johnson. There's The Name of the Star, The Madness Underneath, and The Shadow Cabinet. I will warn you, because I did not know this going in, this series is not finished and it is unsure when it's going to be finished, but if you want to just get into the spooky mood and you want like a really solid story, I do recommend this. It is about ghosts, so it is very paranormal. I would also like to recommend Welcome to Night Vale. This is something I feel like you're going to get more out of if you enjoy the podcast that this is based off of, also called Welcome to Night Vale, which I have actually been listening to since it started and then stopped listening to it after like a year or so, and now I'm just too scared to catch up because there's too many episodes. But I think this book series is really fun. It's more on the bizarre end of the spectrum, as in like it makes no sense, but it's very entertaining at certain points, and it does have like a thriller mystery in here, but it's not terrifying by any means whatsoever. So I think this is a good place for people who don't really like horror but still want to get into the spooky mood. Next up, getting into more of like thriller territory but not quite horror, I'm gonna go with The Luminous Dead by Caitlin Starling. This is a very enclosed mystery in which, or rather thriller, it's not even a mystery, where this girl climbs down into caves on an expedition and she has only contact with one other person who is on her mic. And there are cave monsters that we don't quite know what they are, and this builds suspense better than like any of the books that I've read probably in my life. That was my favorite thing about this. I read this in one day because the suspense was built so well that it will keep you on the edge of your seat the entire time. I adored this. I feel like people don't talk enough about this book, to be completely honest. Next up, Swan. I feel like I didn't talk that much about because I read it last year when I wasn't making videos, and that is Neverworld Wake by Marisha Pessl. And this is very much something that plays with the Groundhog Day trope in that you relive the same day over and over and over, but with more of a sci-fi twist. I'm just now realizing a lot of these are like sci-fi thrillers. I don't think all of them are. Not quite. It's this group of like teenagers or like early 20-somethings, and they have to relive the same day over and over, and a lot of them don't believe it at first, so they go do like drastic things trying to get out of the loop, and they can't. And then this like harbinger of death person says they all have to come to a consensus of who gets to survive, and then the rest of them die, and that's how they can break out of the loop. And it takes them forever. Like, that's my favorite thing about this book, and how it differs itself from other Groundhog Day type situations, is that this takes place over like a really long period of time and not just like a couple of days or like a week or two, like a lot of the Groundhog Day adaptations take place over. I'm bad at talking. I've already filmed like 3 videos today. But I really enjoyed this. I have not liked Marisha Pessl's other books, I'll be the first to say that, but I really like this one. Next up is a more contemporary one, but has one of the best built suspense ever, probably alongside The Luminous Dead, and that is I'm Thinking of Ending Things by Ian Reid. I actually really want to reread this. I don't know if that's going to happen this October because I already have a huge TBR, but I do eventually want to reread this. Maybe on audio, because I've heard the audio is like pretty dang creepy. And this just starts off as what seems like a contemporary, like a normal contemporary, where this girl is going with her boyfriend to meet her boyfriend's parents. And the suspense just builds from there. Like, and she's planning on breaking up with him, but she was like, oh, fine, I'll go with you to meet your parents. And she's thinking of ending things, hence the title. And this is one of the best suspense thrillers I've ever read. The ending makes no sense. I had to reread it like 600 times, and that's half the reason I want to reread this. But this book has stuck in my head for years. I read it several years ago, and it's still one of my favorite thrillers. And then next, I'm just gonna do a blanket statement of any of John Mars's books. This is just the one that I happen to own physically and is probably my favorite. I just made a video on where to start with John Mars and like an overview of all of his books, so I will link that down below if you want to check that out if you haven't already. But he has very quickly become like my favorite thriller author of all time. Within the last like year or so, like I had read 2 of his books at the end of last year, and then I read all of the rest of his books over the last like couple of months during the summer, so definitely recommend any of his books. I would also, as an author blanket statement, would like to recommend Blake Crouch. Where is it at? I would recommend Dark Matter, but I feel like everybody knows what that is, so I'm gonna recommend the Pines trilogy, the Wayward Pines trilogy by Blake Crouch. First one being Pines, second one being Wayward, and the third one being The Last Town. I also would love to reread these. This is one of like the best trilogies that I've read. This feels very much, it almost feels dystopian. I would give it a dystopian like blanket statement, but I do think these are much more thriller than your average dystopian, and the way that this world is expanded with each book is my favorite thing. The plot twist in the first one of my favorite plot twists of all time. So I definitely recommend the Pines trilogy for sure. Even if you've never read any other Blake Crouch, this is definitely a solid place to start. And then heading into the horror aspect of this, I have a couple that are more contemporary horror. I have one that like verges on supernatural, and then 2 supernatural ones. The first being Confessions by Kane Minato. This is a Japanese horror story, and this takes place with our main character is a teacher, and she starts off the class by saying, I know one of you killed my daughter and was responsible for her death. And it goes from there. This does take place in other perspectives, which I did not know going in, so beware of that. I really enjoyed the audiobook. I would recommend that for this. This is also very short, and this is just so messed up, and it's very much in that like Japanese style of, they don't quite explain, like, they don't, what's the right word? They don't sugarcoat anything. They will just say, straight up say a very gruesome sentence and just leave it and like have no elaboration on the sentence, and you're like, what did I just hear? What did you just say? Like, what did I just read? That is tends to be a theme in Japanese horror, but I really enjoyed this. I think I gave it like a 4-star, maybe a little bit less than that at the time, but it has stuck in my head for sure. Next up was one of my favorite books of last year, and that is The Turn of the Key by Ruth Ware. Ruth Ware, I hear, is a big hit or miss for a lot of people. This is the only one of her books that I have read so far, and I'm quite frankly scared to read the rest of her books because they don't get great ratings, and I loved this one, probably because I related to the main character so well. I am also a nanny. The main character, this is a nanny, and the horror, like thriller aspects of it are great. It's very much almost a haunted house story. It takes place when the nanny gets this job in this like rich person's like big house that has a lot of technology, and the technology like starts going on the fritz when she moves in there. She's like a stay-in nanny, like she lives at home with them, and she has a whole ordeal with like having issues with the technology and with the children. And I am not normally someone that likes like spooky children things in scary movies or books, and this one did it well, so I definitely recommend this. Next up, I don't own this one because I've just read it in the last couple of months and haven't got my hands on a physical copy yet, and that is The Twisted Ones by T. Kingfisher. She also has another book coming out in October that I really want to get my hands on, and I'm probably going to add to my TBR if I can get my hands on the audiobook. But this one is probably the most entertaining thriller or horror I've ever read. This main character is so funny. She's very much someone that was dropped into like a scary movie and was like relatively smart and is like, of course this is happening to me. Of course there's like a monster chasing after me that lives near these woods where my grandma's house is. Like, she's that type of main character, and I loved her. She's probably been one of my favorite characters that I read this year. And I just thought this was really fun, but it's also like pretty creepy. Like, there are scenes that are pretty creepy and that will stay in your mind. So I'm very much looking forward to reading more of T. Kingfisher. Next up, I would like to recommend Imaginary Friend by Stephen Chbosky. This I've talked about several times, I feel like, in the last couple of weeks, because I'm going to be rereading it this month. But this is about a boy who isn't very smart, and then one day he goes out into the woods and comes back a genius. He meets a man called the Nice Man. He comes back a genius, and the Nice Man tells him to build a treehouse in the forest. And that's about all I'm going to say about it. This has some of the creepiest scenes I've ever read in a book in it. And even though I originally didn't give this that high of a rating, I do think my rating is going to go up upon reread this month because This has been one of the few books that I've read that have stuck in my head. As in, like, those horror scenes are so prevalent that they are never going to leave my brain, and apparently that's just my favorite thing about horror and thriller books. If I don't forget any scenes, then it must be a good book, because apparently I forget things a lot. It's also, I feel like I'm a very hard person to scare because I've seen so many scary movies. I grew up on scary movies and watched them, like, since I was way too young to be watching them, like 8 years old when I first saw it, and it made me terrified of clowns. So me being hard to scare makes it more impressive when a book scares me, especially because I am very hard to scare within a book form. Like, I just don't have that visceral reaction to books, and this one did that with several scenes. And like, I could mention some Stephen King. My favorite Stephen King is Pet Sematary, which is right there. I feel like everybody knows to pick up Stephen King, so we're not even going to mention him in this video. And my last recommendation is The House of Leaves by Mark Danielewski. This is the creepiest book I have ever read in my entire life. It's got a ton of weird formatting. I really want to reread this, but it's like, it's a chunk and it takes a while to read because you have to like flip pages sometimes to be able to read the text. There's like blank pages sometimes. There's like little instances where like there's some of the text is upside down. It's a ride of a book. But this is honestly one of my favorite books of all time. I adore this book. It's about these people that get a house, and in this house there is a door that doesn't make sense to be in the house. Like, architecturally it shouldn't be there because there is nothing on the outside of the house, kind of like the TARDIS in Doctor Who, like it's bigger on the inside than the outside. That is the basic premise for this, but it is such a horror masterpiece, and if you have not picked this up yet, I don't know why. Please do. It's amazing. But yeah, I am not pulling all of this back out. But these, those are all of my horror and thriller recommendations. I hope you all enjoyed this. Let me know if you end up reading any of these books. Thank you all for watching, and I will see all of you guys next time.